Hi, everyone, and welcome to our October webinar. I am so excited today for building a collection and library program that celebrates diversity and inclusion. This is going to be an amazing webinar. I'm going to put this link up for a second so you can jot it down or scan it if you have a device, and we'll share this too at the end, but this will take you to the slides and collection of resources and even to the recording once we have it. Give you a second to jot that down. And like I said, I'll share that too at the end. We're really thankful for our sponsors for Follett and everything that you do today and every day in supporting us as librarians. And my name is Shannon McClintock Miller. I am the District Teacher Librarian and Innovation Director at Van Meter Community School in Van Meter, Iowa. I also serve as the Future Ready Librarians spokesperson, working with the Alliance and working with Follett and all of the great Future Ready librarians around the country. You can find me on Twitter at Shannon M. Miller and Instagram, and I blog at the Library Voice, and I put my email on here too. If you have any questions about today or anytime, please feel free to reach out. And if you have questions today, you can post them to Future Ready Libs on Twitter. And always be part of that conversation, not only on Twitter, but we share a lot on Instagram and of course our Facebook group too, that I'll share a link at the end. But please reach out if you have questions, not only of course to me, because I'm going to be listening to all these great conversations, but to our guests. And the conversation too continues just using Future Ready and following what we're doing too as a group. And I think the things that are being shared, not only by librarians, but by administrators and teachers and technology integrationists is such a great conversation. And so be part of that because it's really important. If you have anything that you're looking for or you need more information about Future Ready Librarians, the link is at the bottom. And I wanted to just, as we always do, just reflect on our framework as Future Ready Librarians as we start our webinar. And today it's such an important conversation that really centers in literacy. And what we do as librarians and educators, literacy is definitely the center of everything that we do, and everything falls around it, and how we embrace our kids, especially as we're at school or if we're remote with them. I think the conversations that we have today are going to be so relevant and important. So I'm excited today to welcome guests from two great school districts in the United States. The first one is Baltimore County Public Schools, and they're going to speak first, and then we're going to hear from the Denver Public School System. So I'm going to let our two guests take it away from here.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to get started with the whole idea of basic steps. And I think we actually introduce ourselves first. So there we go.
Yep. Hi, I am Alon Rochelle. I am a library media specialist at Timonium Elementary School in Timonium, Maryland. You can follow me on Twitter at TimoniumES_LIB. And I also have my email on the screen there. If you have any questions about what we talk about today, you feel free to email me.
All right. Hi, I'm Tanisha Love. You can call me Tiki, and I'm a librarian at Lock Raven Technical Academy here in the Towson area of Maryland. You can follow me on Twitter, whether it's the Lit LC or at T Loves Books, and then there's my email address. All right. So now we're going to talk about the steps to success when it comes to diversity in your collection. We're going to just share some insights and things that we've learned and determined from our work doing this. Step one, you definitely have to think about what the definition is for diversity. And you'll notice on the left hand of the slide, there's the definition that's provided by the dictionary Merriam-Webster. And you'll notice that it talks about the idea of there being different elements. There's also an idea of different qualities when we look at the word diversity. And then on the right-hand side, we have some of the words that were in the collection and information that's represented by ALA when it comes to diversity in our library collections. So some of the key words that keep popping up, especially using Answer Garden, is the idea of representation of cultures. You'll notice that it's very specific when it talks about authentic voices and a variety of languages. And so we're going to give you some more insights in regards to diversifying your collection with the rest of the steps. Step 2 is making sure that you also, step 1 is also making sure that you consider that there's so many elements. You'll think about diversity and the fact that it changes and evolves a lot of the times according to what's going on in the world. And so you'll notice at the top, race and culture, a lot of us, when we think about diversifying our collections, we think about the race and the culture, the race that is represented, the race that is writing the books, and then also the culture that it represents. But we also want to think about at the heart of it, the authentic voices, whether there's representation, the whole idea of having community input and also providing an area for reflection. And then on the left-hand side, just consider the idea of language, culture, sexual orientation, formats. Think about the fact that you want to have a variety of formats, whether it's audio, digital, or ebooks, especially in virtual learning settings. And then also if you want to have print books or actual books on the shelves, if you're actually lucky enough to be in your school buildings at this time. The last thing to highlight is the idea of regionalism and socioeconomic status, as well as class. Those are some other areas that you can consider when you're looking at diversifying your collection. And then number 2, before I talk about step number 2, I just want to share a quick story. So, and I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think for the past 7 or 10 years, Baltimore County has been talking about diversifying our collections. And every time we have a professional development, it continues to come up. What are we doing to make sure that we're having collections that reflect our students and our school communities? And so this year when we did our collection development, I saw that there were some gaps because notice on the left-hand side, there's an extra area that wasn't even being considered by me up until this year, social and emotional learning. And so I saw that there were some areas that I need to keep in mind when I'm looking at the collection in my school, whether it's social awareness, identity, bullying, but then also on the right-hand side, there's a lot of topics that I didn't even consider before, such as the idea of having books that not only reflect human rights and civil rights, but also the role of what's going on with immigrants and refugees, the idea of prejudice in our society. So consider all those different things, and this certainly isn't all of them, but making sure that you have that type of information available to your students, your staff, your teachers, your school community, because that is one of the ways that we can make sure that we're future ready. Lon?
So you can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So after that, we said our next step was to make sure we get input when we select our new titles. In our county, we are lucky that at our school, we kind of have our, each librarian is able to kind of look at their collection independently. But we also want to make sure that it's not just a collection for the librarian. We want to make sure we get other stakeholders involved. So asking parents for suggestions, definitely asking students. If you see on my slide, I have an example of one of the suggestion slips I use in my library. And students just fill out like, I think we need this book. And I even let them check off if they would prefer it as an ebook or a print book. Because as Tiki said, you know, some students prefer to read digitally and some prefer to read it print. So that's another lens that we want to look at when we're looking at diversity. And I also asked teachers what they would like to see in our library, especially if there's things that could go along with their curriculum. I want to try to be providing the best titles that are going to help them out. And we were in making this, we thought that, you know, I've always done this suggestion box when we're in person, but I hadn't thought to do it online. And that would be a great thing, a really easy Google form or something like that, that I can make for my students to fill out. So that is now on my list of things to do, to give my students some input on the books that we're going to be getting, a lot of ebooks this year for our collection. And in my school, I don't have a library advisory committee, but a lot of schools in Baltimore County do, especially the middle and high schools. And a lot of the students that are part of that, they actually get to look at the budget, they get to look at the reviews of the books, and they get to be really involved in that process. They even get to help unbox when the new books come. They helped promote the books. So that's a really great way to make them really feel like the library is a place for everyone. And then one of the other ways I get input when selecting new titles is really, I rely on social media a lot. I follow authors and publishers and organizations, and that way I can keep up with the new titles that are coming out. And this summer, I discovered 2 really great organizations that I hadn't heard of before that have so many amazing resources. So I put them up there. One is called the Brown Bookshelf, and they are designed to put awareness for books about books about Black characters, and by Black authors. And in our collection that Shannon will share at the end that we put together, there is a list of picture books that celebrate Black joy. So they have other resource lists like that as well, but that one was really helpful for me. And the Conscious Kid is another organization that is dedicated to equity and promoting healthy racial identity. So I've been using that to find some new titles as well. Right, and then more input, because you can never get enough input when you're selecting new titles. Hopefully, most of you already know about it, but We Need Diverse Books. Their website has a lot of resources that are super helpful. Not only do they have book lists on there, but they have things pre-made for you to help promote different books. So there are like papers that will say, if you liked this book, try that book. And I really like those because I feel like sometimes our kids just read like the same Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, and that's great. But sometimes we need to expose them to some other books as well. So they already have those made for you. You don't have to do it yourself, which is always great. Also, the Read Across America, this has kind of expanded in the last couple years. So they used to mostly do, or at least what I knew them for, is doing Read Across America Week. But now they really have expanded it to make it a year-long celebration of literacy. And they have a calendar where they highlight a different topic every month. So you can kind of see that in the bottom left. That November will be Celebrate Indigenous Peoples. This month, I believe, is Activate Young Citizens because it's all about voting. So they have at least one anchor text for each concept and some other ideas to go along with that. So that's another great resource. And that's in the collection that we're going to share as well. And then School Library Journal is another great place to get ideas. They have a lot of reviews for books. They also just came out with this past weekend with the School Library Journal Summit. They came out with their list of the best books of 2020. So I already was writing down my list of books I need to purchase. And then Follett is a great source as well. We use Follett to order a lot of our books, but when you're searching on there, they have ways that you can search for award-winning books. So you can see like all the Coretta Scott King Award winners or any of the other awards that you're looking for, the American Indian Awards, all those sort of things. So you can really expand that way. And then I actually learned about teachingbooks.net diverse books toolkit at the School Library Journal Summit this weekend. But they have different ways you can search through their book, and you can see a little screenshot of that on the slide. So this would be especially helpful if when you looked at your collection and you saw that you had a gap somewhere, then you can specifically search out those types of books to fill that gap. And for us, we have a rule in Baltimore County that any book we purchase for our library needs to have 2 positive reviews from a scholarly source. So that just helps make sure we're getting quality literature when we're picking our books. And then finally, our last step is to promote the collection. Because it doesn't do much good for us to have all of these diverse books included if kids are just checking out Diary of a Wimpy Kid every week, which happens in my library at least. But I would say one of the biggest ways to promote, at least in the elementary library, is displays, because that's what they grab. They see them, they grab them. In the virtual world, we've been using a lot of custom Destiny banners, so we can make a little collection that way, and it shows up right when the students go to our Destiny page and access the catalog. I've also been trying to do a lot of book talks, so I do Book Talk Tuesday at my school, and I always make a video. Well, now make a video. I used to go on the announcements, but to talk about a book that I think that they should know about and read. And with book trailers, I find a lot online, but that's one of the things I love to let my students create. And then they really love creating them and seeing their classmates or even previous years students, they love to see the book trailers that they come up with. So a lot of times our units are about award-winning books or something like that, and they will make a trailer to share one of the books that they read and tell other people why they want to read that. And those are just great to look at because they get so creative. And I also have students make shelf talkers. So those are little pieces of paper that go underneath the book on the shelf to tell others to check out the book. And so another part of promoting our collection is when you are teaching your lessons to be deliberate in your choice of text. So we actually noticed during curriculum writing one year, we had done a curriculum audit, and in our kindergarten unit for the library media program, we noticed a lot of the text were from white male authors. So we went out of our way to try to find alternate texts that would still meet the same objective for the lesson, but could expose students to a wider range of experiences. And then, like I kind of mentioned already with the shelf talkers and the book trailers, I try to give my students ownership to help them promote when appropriate, because that just makes the other students more likely to listen, and the students that get to have their product being displayed, they are so proud of seeing that. So it always makes the library a more welcoming place.
Thank you so much. I love all of the ideas, and I can't wait to dig in a little bit more to the things that you suggested. When I was putting together the collection, there were some new things that I hadn't heard of, and so we'll be sharing that too at the end, but thank you guys so much. Now, up next are 4 librarians that you're going to hear from Denver Public Schools.
Great. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you, Tiki and Alon. So many great ideas. I love being able to learn from other librarians. So we are a team of 4 librarians. Terry, Lori, and I joined DPS Library Services in 2017, and Amanda joined us 1 year later. And together we support our district of 93,000 students with ordering print and digital books for school libraries and managing the district ebook and audiobook collection. Our guiding principle is to ensure our students have access to inclusive, culturally responsive, and linguistically diverse library collections. Today, we'll share with you some strategies that we've found to be successful for increasing our intentionality, listening to perspectives from historically marginalized communities to guide our work, engaging in conversations about racism and othering, and ultimately creating inclusive collections by design. We are not experts, but we do consider ourselves to be lifelong learners, and we are committed to doing the continual work of reflecting on our own biases and dismantling injustice. We recognize that the 4 of us reflect the majority of library decision makers who are white, cisgender, heterosexual, and non-disabled women. It is critical that we not only reflect on our own biases and privilege, but that we seek out the perspectives of the Black, Latinx, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, Muslim, Jewish, and neurodiverse communities, and other identities that have been historically underrepresented and misrepresented by the publishing industry. So to create inclusive collections by design, we have 3 main tools in our toolbox: selection, weeding, and curation. And each year we apply our learning to refine these tools to more effectively lift up the voices of marginalized groups. The first tool is selection, which is the most powerful, as it is the act of deciding what texts our students have access to. Lori will share our sources and strategies for identifying and evaluating authentic, culturally responsive, inclusive, and linguistically diverse texts. Next, Terry will explain the difference between a collection audit and a selection audit, how we built our selection audit tool, and how we disrupt publishing statistics by boosting collections with inclusive titles. Our second tool is weeding. Amanda will describe the critical role that weeding plays in managing library collections by removing outdated titles that often promote bias and harmful stereotypes. And our third tool is curation. I'll close out our talk with some examples of how we use curation to increase students' access to inclusive titles. And now I'll turn it over to Lori, who will share how we source and select titles.
Thank you, Susie. So in terms of sourcing and selecting titles for inclusion in our collection, our team doesn't really have one fail-safe method that we use to identify and evaluate culturally responsive texts. Instead, we use a number of different sources and strategies. So one of the strategies that we use to keep abreast of new and forthcoming titles is to get on the mailing lists of both small, diverse presses, as well as the more well-known publishers, so that notifications are just automatically pushed to our email accounts. On this slide, I've provided you with a list of diverse publishers and distributors, as well as some of the companies from which I receive regular email notifications. So industry review magazines are another tool that we use quite a bit to not only identify new publications as they're coming out, but also to start evaluating content through that culturally responsive lens. Kirkus in particular, I think, does an excellent job of looking at inclusivity and diversity when they're reviewing their titles. And so they're one of the reviewers that I consult regularly when I'm choosing books. Now, I know most of these publications require subscriptions to see the full content. And I think this was mentioned earlier, you can go to the magazine's website and you can still see some of the content and the reviews for free. School Library Journal is one of the ones that was mentioned and that I use as well. They give you access to four free articles a month. And they're perfect for those great lists that they put out, like the 2020 list that they just came out with. Similarly, Publishers Weekly is another one that I use on a regular basis. They offer about a dozen different free newsletters that you can sign up to, and then that content is pushed to your email on a daily or weekly basis. I find the newsletters particularly helpful when for identifying forthcoming titles and then looking to see which titles are getting a lot of hype in the publishing world. And right now, during the pandemic, some of these magazines are providing free digital subscriptions to anyone who requests them. So if you don't have funding for paid subscriptions, but you use Follett for book ordering, they're another great source for identifying culturally responsive texts. In addition to providing the full text reviews from some of these more notable review journals, they also include learning outcomes and genre and classification tags in each of their records. I find these features to be particularly helpful when I'm trying to determine whether a story includes characters of color or characters from other marginalized communities. The tags are also searchable in TitleWave. So if you are looking for a book about, say, the refugee experience and you want to find other titles, you can simply click on the tag to generate a new search. Attending webinars, conferences, and other professional development events is another great way to learn about diversity in literature. Booklist has been my go-to source lately. They offer 1-hour webinars about 2 to 3 times a month, and almost every webinar I've attended recently features authors or books with characters with diverse identities. Booklist also archives all of their webinars, so if you're not able to watch them live, you can always visit their website at a later time and watch them at your convenience. Many national, state, and local organizations like ALA and here in Colorado, the Colorado State Library, offer free professional development opportunities. The Colorado State Library, for example, back in August, offered a session on normalizing the discussion of race with children in libraries, and that webinar is still readily available on their website. So I would encourage you to check out your local and state offerings as well. Note too that once you become a member of ALA or you attend one of these webinar events, Your contact information is typically passed on to their sponsors, and then their sponsors in turn will start to push new event and publication information directly to you. So on this next slide, on the right-hand side, you'll see two images. These images link to blogs and websites that focus on diversity in literature. Both of these sites, the We Need Diverse Books and the Teen Librarian Toolbox, have a wealth of resources that are worth looking at when you have some time. Some of these resources were already mentioned. They're like really a wealth of information on these sites, so you need some time to go through it all. The other links that I've listed on the left-hand side of the screen are also included in the two lists I just mentioned, but these are some of the ones that our team uses most frequently when we're evaluating texts for diversity and inclusivity. And then finally, we use our social media platforms as another means of keeping abreast of diverse books and topics, as well as a way to promote books and authors that we want our community to be aware of. I've provided links to the 3 platforms that we're on. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, if you'd like to follow us, and then in turn see the authors and organizations we're following. I will mention that when we established our social media platforms, we made a conscious effort to really seek out and follow diverse publishers and organizations, and to follow authors of color and blogs that focus on diversity in literature, so that we could more readily see in our daily feeds the titles that they're marketing, as well as follow along with topics of discussion in a timely manner. So I'm going to turn it over now to Terry, who's going to discuss the ways we apply these different resources and strategies in our selection audits.
Thank you, Lori. So let's talk about the difference between collection audits and the selection audit tool that we created. So you might be familiar with this graphic that illustrates the appalling lack of representation in children's books in 2018. That 77% of all books published for children that year featured white or animal protagonists is truly disheartening. Our libraries and collections must be safe spaces where children of all identities can both see themselves and learn authentically about others. We learned about other libraries that had started conducting collection audits so that they could understand the diversity of their collections by looking at the books that they already owned. We had debated about doing the same, but then we had our aha moment. Why undertake that action when we could just simply concede the point? Because books purchased up till then were not made through an equity lens, our libraries would indeed reflect that grim lack of cultural representation. But we knew we could become ambitiously proactive going forward. So we decided to create a mechanism of disrupting and dismantling that inequity by annually infusing our collections with consistent, deliberate, and focused selections that are deeply rooted in cultural responsiveness. So we built our selection audit tool, which we use to inform our collection development in each of our libraries. We know that by using this tool in tandem with the targeted weeding that Amanda will speak to in a minute, our collections are becoming stronger and better. This is our selection tool. I'll explain the details left to right so that you can follow along. This is the elementary equity list for the 2020-21 school year. And you can see that we include picture books, fiction, nonfiction, biographies, graphic novels, and beginning reader series. And then we color code them for easy identification. This helps ensure that we're closing gaps through each section. Then, as we begin to identify potential titles using the resources Lori just talked about, we dig into each author to help us identify authentic perspectives. As I find the author, I link their website into the document for easy reference. Moving to the right, for the chapter books, we continue to close gaps by making sure we balance genres. The next few columns are where the magic really happens. We dedicate 2 columns to identify the cultures represented in the book, which we've built as drop-down menu options. The categories include Asian, Black, Indigenous, Jewish, Latinx, Middle Eastern, and Muslim, and we also include multiple and other as additional options. The next 2 columns help us unpack the experiences represented in the book. We look for family structure diversity, immigration and emigration themes, LGBTQ+ themes, mental health challenges, neurodiversity, physical challenges, poverty and homelessness, refugees, substance abuse, and again, we include both multiple and other options. Then we identify which of these books are authentic or own voices. While we don't have own voices as an absolute mandate, we really prefer having these perspectives represented. The next column is used to identify other informative details, such as identifying a specific culture or a specific aspect of a challenge. And the last column is for our rationale. Besides strong reviews from professional journals, why did this book land on this list? Now look at the bottom left, and you can see that, again, this is the elementary list. The middle school and high school tabs are easily accessible in this same document. As we created these lists, we read as many titles as we could, leaning on those trusted review sources for any books we didn't get to. As we get closer to finalizing our lists, we comb through them critically, looking for balance. Do we have strong LGBTQ representation? What physical challenges are portrayed? Is one culture more limited on the list? Do we have enough graphic novels and biographies and so forth? We make adjustments as necessary to achieve a solidly balanced list. And that step also helped me identify my own personal biases, which I found both humbling and powerful. We strive to finish our lists in July, and then we build follow-up cards for each age band, which we then share out to all our schools. Our request to them is that they purchase these cards every year. But if their budget is limited, we highlight the top 50 titles, which I've signified with a check mark on the far left side of the document. We also build and share Spanish equity cards of 50 new strong Spanish titles that we'd like our libraries to carry. And this year we built history cards to expand authentic historical perspectives of traditionally marginalized groups, which we also shared as follow-up cards. We then published this list as the DPS Top 100, and we pushed these lists out extensively through our social media platforms. So that's our selection tool. Weeding can have equal impact in removing outdated and often biased titles. And this is what Amanda's going to speak to.
Thank you, Terry. Weeding is one of my favorite topics. So 3 years ago, we created our Denver Public Schools weeding guidance document. We based our weeding criteria on current weeding practices, the CREW method, and lots of research. One of the best things to come from having this weeding guidance document is that we now have consistency when we weed school libraries in our district. We weed to remove damaged, outdated, and biased material. We consider this a living document, and we continuously update this as we learn more. For example, Follett has a new diversity tool that we are currently exploring. Once we have a better handle on how this tool works, our hope is to add it to our before and after weeding procedures to better understand a collection's diversity. Next. When we are weeding books, we open each and every book. Checking copyright is an obvious and easy way to decide to weed or keep a book in a collection. This blurb comes from the Guide for Selecting Anti-Biased Children's Books and gives a compelling reason to look at copyright when weeding. Since the 1970s, more children's books have been published that more accurately and respectfully reflect diversity. However, there are books that have been published since the 1970s that do not. Next. In addition to the copyright date, we also look at the illustrations. We are specifically looking for stereotypes of any identity group, including gender, race, class, sexual orientation, abilities, and disabilities. How to Celebrate Thanksgiving is a book that we weed from our school libraries based on the illustrations throughout the book that portray stereotypes of Indigenous and Asian characters. We learned more about this from a blog post by Debbie Reese, who writes for the American Indians in children's literature. We created standards for DPS school library print collections based on data we have collected for years. Our goal with weeding libraries is to move them from at-risk to exemplary, and of course, to weed damaged, outdated, and biased material. This document shows the impact of our weeding guidelines on a school library after a comprehensive weeding project. Once we finish weeding a school library collection, we shift and move the collection to best fit the space. We also move collections to meet the flow of the library and put high demand collections in visible locations. During this part of the project, we also stage the library. Facing out books with diverse representation is a no-cost way to change the environment and to make the library a more welcoming place. We know that students are more likely to select display books, and this is an easy way to make available culturally responsive books to all of our students. Typically, we see shelves that are very full where there is no space on these shelves to display books. With weeding and shifting, we often make that space. Now we have a space to display books facing out. Again, we are creating a warm and welcoming environment and display culturally responsive books to all of our students. After a weeding project, one of my favorite questions from the students that we almost always get, where did we get all these new books from? In actuality, they didn't even get any new books, but the books they do have are more visible and more accessible. Susie will now talk about how our Destiny and Sora collections are another way for us to make culturally responsive titles more visible and accessible.
Thanks, Amanda. Similar to how we forward-face inclusive titles on bookshelves, curation is another tool in our toolbox for designing ways for students to interact with inclusive texts. We curate culturally responsive Follett Destiny and Sora ebook collections to increase the visibility of our inclusive titles and ensure all students see their unique identities and lived experiences in our collections. These are all collections we have created in our district-wide ebook and audiobook digital library, and we intentionally rotate these in the top tier to amplify their visibility. These include Own Voices collections, collections in languages other than English, collections that highlight specific identities and lived experiences, and collections that disrupt white-centered writing like Black Boy Joy, stories that celebrate the humanity of Black boys, and History Liberated, nonfiction texts that highlight the perspectives of historically marginalized groups to present a more accurate, well-rounded view of history. To further increase visibility of our DPS Top 100 selections and promote library programming that celebrates diversity and inclusion, we also create visually appealing slide decks to promote these titles. These are a few sample slides of the DPS Top 100 slide deck of middle school titles that Amanda created, which we share with all library staff to support their reading advisory. And finally, social media has been a powerful way for us to share our curated content to students, teachers, library staff, and the wider community. These are examples of posts we shared to promote the DPS Top 100 selections. We are intentional about following and tagging authors of the titles we highlight to lift up their voices, and as Lori mentioned, raise our own awareness by reading their posts on our feeds. So this concludes our portion of the presentation. We hope that the strategies we've shared today will spark new ideas for moving forward the work of creating inclusive collections. Thanks so much. Shannon, I'll turn it over to you.
That was amazing. And I have a question. Well, I can't wait to dig into this and all those great lists. And is the selection tool available? Are you guys sharing that with everybody?
Yes, in the resources, we have created a link which will force a copy so that you can create your own copy and use this tool yourself.
Oh, that's awesome. You guys are fantastic. And so we appreciate both of these stories so much. And I know that everybody can't wait to just dig into all these resources. And I'm sure that you're going to have some questions and new followers too. So thank you everyone for sharing all of that great information. Now, a few things that I want to share. We do this every time we have a webinar just to kind of get caught up on what we are doing within Future Ready Librarians and the network. Again, this is the link that you can get to all the resources that we just shared and to the recording and also to the slides that we have. And this is the collection, and I'm really excited about this one. I said that to them before we started presenting that this is really one of the best resources that we have had when it comes to this topic and just things that we can do to support our library collection. So we're really thankful for everything that you so graciously shared in this. I know that I'm excited to share this with my teachers too. So this is a public collection and anyone can use this and share it. And there is a link in that slide. Also, this is the link to get to our page on the Future Ready Schools website that has lots of information about Future Ready Librarians. And there's been a few new things shared in the last couple months. One that I'm really excited about is the conversation starter. I don't think that there's ever been a time more important than those conversations that we're having with the leaders within our schools, especially right now to support remote learning and our remote learners and blended learning. And so this will be really helpful just walking through. Another new thing that we have this fall is our podcast series, Leading from the Library, Leading through the Library. And we have, I think there's been 4 now or 5. This has just been so fun to interview people about all kinds of topics. And I'm excited to get to continue these and share them. And so you can check them out. You can also find them on however you listen to your podcast too. So I've been having a lot of fun listening to them again as I walk outside or on my treadmill. So those are something that you can check out. We also just kicked off our Future Ready Librarians Challenge series a few weeks ago. You can find these at the link below. And we've been using just our hashtag to share the work. And it's great because I have been doing these too, just reflecting on my own practice and what is happening right now within school and the library. And I really have enjoyed just taking some time, this little bite-sized PD that we can get. And so there's 2 activities already up. There are 2 more coming also in November, and we would love it if you participated in those 2. And then the thing that we have been getting ready for the event is our summit. And in August, we had 2 days of a summit. It was a great success, just learned so much and made lots of great connections with amazing librarians. And we're having this again, November 7th and 21st. You can still sign up at the link below. And we are going to have just such a great, I think it's 3 hours each day. We're going to have just great conversations and lots of interaction. And so I hope that you all can join us for that too. Another thing that I wanted to share is the Future Ready Planning Guide for High Quality Remote Learning. This is something that the Alliance, I think it was last month, it was released. And I find this just so helpful for me as a librarian, but also just a great resource to share with my administrators and my teachers. And it dives into each one of the gears, the wedges, and really goes into the things that we have if it's a challenge, and then ideas to consider on how to support us. And so this has been really helpful, especially, when we're having those conversations, using that conversation starter, but use these 2 as you're having those with your leaders and also your teachers too. And as I said earlier, please be part of the conversation that we're having on our hashtags. And if you don't already, join the Future Ready Librarian Facebook page. This is such a great place for just connections and conversations and learning. I learn so much every day by going there, and I just love the community we have. And so if you don't already belong, please join us because we would love to have you. And I love following, I always like to say this, the Future Ready Libs hashtag, like on Twitter and Instagram and all the great things everybody is doing, but also follow along what's happening in Future Ready and those other areas, because important information is being shared too. And again, just being able to help as much as we can within our district, this is a really helpful place to go. So thank you, Follett, and thank you to all of our special guests and all of you who are watching. We enjoyed today, and I know that I learned so much, and I can't wait just to go back to school and look at my collection and see what I can do to make it even better. So we are just so thankful for all that information. And please join us for our next webinar on December 15th at 4 p.m. Eastern, as we have our 2nd annual Fireside Chat. It's always a great and fun way to end our year. And so we hope you can join us for that too. But thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions, reach out to our guests, and we will share their contact information too when we share all of this information and those resources. So goodbye. Have a great day.